How would you feel if you were accused and punished for a crime you never committed? Heartbreaking, right? This was the same real-life situation Jim Sheridan depicted in his 1993 classic titled In the Name of the Father. What is more fascinating is the fact that the movie blurred the line between fiction and reality. Let's find out 20 weird facts about the movie that will completely leave you awestruck. Number 20. The movie is based on Jerry Conlon's autobiography. While the emotional intensity and the depth of performances got viewers spellbound, many didn't realize that the film wasn't a fictional creation born out of Hollywood imagination. It was based on a true life story. In the Name of the Father was the painful, turbulent life of Jerry Conlon, a man who spent 15 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. The film came directly from his autobiography, Proven Innocent, a book he wrote after his release to shed light on the infamous case of the Guildford Four and the devastating consequences of wrongful convictions. The Guildford Four were four young people named Jerry Conlon, Paul Hill, Patty Armstrong, and Carol Richardson. They were arrested in 1974 after a deadly bombing at a pub in Guildford, England. This bomb blast took the lives of 5 people, and the British government thought they were guilty. At the height of the Troubles, when tension between the IRA and the British government was at its peak, authorities were desperate to find those responsible for the attack. That desperation quickly turned into injustice. Conlon and the others were tortured, coerced into false confessions, and swiftly convicted. Jerry Conlon's case was different and more complicated. His father, Giuseppe Conlon, traveled from Belfast to London to help his son. Unfortunately, he was also arrested by the authorities and charged as part of the so-called Maguire 7. He tragically passed away in prison before his name was cleared. The injustice was particularly heartbreaking for Jerry. His freedom was not only stolen, but a wrongful conviction consumed his father's final years. It was in the aftermath of his release in 1989, after 15 long years, that Day-Lewis wrote Proven Innocent. It happened that the convictions were finally overturned due to shocking revelations of suppressed evidence and police misconduct. In his heart-wrenching autobiography, he painstakingly detailed the brutality he endured during interrogations, the hopelessness of his years behind bars, and the profound grief of losing his father in prison. When Jim Sheridan, the acclaimed Irish filmmaker, read Jerry's account, he felt the power of his story. Sheridan knew that Conlon's autobiography was not just about one man's ordeal, but a broader commentary on political prejudice, systemic corruption, and the human spirit's ability to endure. Adapting the autobiography allowed Sheridan and screenwriter Terry George to give voice to those silenced by injustice. Number 19. Jim Sheridan admitted that he bent historical accuracy. Despite the authenticity of the story and the emotional intensity portrayed in the movie, not every act was entirely accurate. Jim Sheridan's aim was not to produce a courtroom documentary. He just wanted to make a film that captured the essence of Jerry Conlon's ordeal, not simply the fine details. Sheridan has since admitted that he deliberately bent historical accuracy in key places because he believed cinema worked best when it revealed only the emotional truth. One of the clearest examples of this is the father-son relationship at the heart of the film. In Sheridan's version, Jerry and his father Giuseppe share a prison cell for much of their sentence, but historically, this never happened. Jerry and Giuseppe were imprisoned separately. They never lived together in the same cell, and their contact was limited. Sheridan also streamlined legal proceedings, compressing events that spanned over a decade into a 2-hour film. In reality, the appeals process was lengthy, complex, and marred by numerous setbacks due to unnecessary procedures. Evidence suppression and police misconduct were uncovered gradually, not in the swift manner depicted in the movie. What do you expect? No matter the length and complexity of the movie, the detailed story can never be told fully. Sheridan made it clear that including every legal technicality would dilute the narrative's power. What is more important was showing the corruption of the system and the hopelessness the Conlons faced, not recreating transcripts line by line. In the end, Sheridan's gamble paid off. While historians and lawyers can point out the inaccuracies, audiences around the world connected deeply with the film's story. Viewers didn't care about prison records, but the condition of a father and son fighting to preserve their dignity against impossible odds. Number 18. Daniel Day-Lewis prepared for the role by living like a prisoner in a real-life prison. Daniel Day-Lewis has long been known as an actor who goes the extra mile to bring his roles to reality. To bring the character of Jerry Conlon to life, Day-Lewis believed he needed to feel, in his own body and mind, a fraction of the despair, claustrophobia, and helplessness that defined Jerry's prison years. Hence, he locked himself inside a prison cell and subjected himself to the same kind of harsh treatment prisoners might endure. Day-Lewis arranged to be confined in Kilmainham Jail, an infamous former prison in Dublin, where some of Ireland's most notorious inmates had once been held. For several days he lived inside the cold, damp, claustrophobic cell, cut off from ordinary comforts. But he didn't stop there. He insisted that honest prison officers treat him as they would treat a difficult inmate. This meant that he was verbally humiliated, intimidated, and even experienced occasional rough physical handling. Day-Lewis didn't want anyone to hold back simply because he was an actor. He wanted the bruising reality of incarceration imprinted on him, so that when he stepped onto set, he could recall the sensations viscerally rather than trying to imagine them. By the time filming began, Day-Lewis had already immersed himself in the hopelessness of confinement, making his portrayal of Jerry Conlon raw and painfully authentic. Fellow actors and crew members remarked he carried the torment of those prison days into his performance. The results were extraordinary. Day-Lewis's performance earned him widespread acclaim and another Academy Award nomination, solidifying his reputation as one of the most fearless performers of his generation. Number 17. Pete Postlethwaite had once been Daniel Day-Lewis's acting teacher. One of the most fascinating layers behind In the Name of the Father is the unexpected connection between its two central actors, Daniel Day-Lewis and Pete Postlethwaite. Long before they portrayed Jerry and Giuseppe Conlon, the rebellious son and wrongly imprisoned father, Postlethwaite had actually been Day-Lewis's acting teacher. This strange connection between their real lives and their cinematic roles gave their performances a depth that audiences could feel but might not have fully understood why. Back in the early stages of his career, Day-Lewis trained at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, where Postlethwaite occasionally taught and mentored younger performers. Day-Lewis, still shaping his own artistic identity, crossed paths with him during this period. Though the mentorship was brief, it left a lasting impression on him. Years later, when Jim Sheridan cast Postlethwaite as Giuseppe Conlon, this history resurfaced again, bringing the mentor and mentee duo to play an on-screen father and son. On-screen, Jerry Conlon was a rebellious, restless young man whose immaturity and recklessness often clashed with his father's calm dignity and wisdom. Off-screen, Day-Lewis had once been the student absorbing Postlethwaite's lessons about discipline, responsibility, and respect for the art of performance. In a sense, their roles in the film mirrored aspects of their real-life relationship. Number 16. Conlon broke down in tears while watching Pete Postlethwaite play his father. The real-life Jerry Conlon felt every bit of the emotional intensity in the Name of the Father. It was more than just a movie based on his life, but also a deeply personal journey into the darkest and most painful chapter of his existence. Watching the story of his wrongful conviction brought to the screen was already an overwhelming experience, but what moved him most was Pete Postlethwaite's haunting performance as his father, Giuseppe Conlon. Conlon was so affected by Postlethwaite's portrayal that he broke down in tears, later admitting it felt as though he were seeing his father alive again. Giuseppe Conlon, the quiet gentleman, had traveled to England from Belfast in 1974 to help his son get justice after he was arrested for the Guildford pub bombings. However, instead of bringing support, he was himself swept up in the arrests and convicted as part of the so-called Maguire 7. At that time, Giuseppe was suffering from poor health. He struggled immensely in prison and tragically passed away in 1980. For Jerry, his father's death was the deepest wound of his imprisonment, a loss that carried unbearable guilt and sorrow. He always felt his reckless lifestyle and his trip to England at the wrong time had drawn his father into a nightmare he didn't deserve. When Pete Postlethwaite portrayed Giuseppe, he did so with extraordinary dignity. His patience with Jerry's flaws, his faith in his son's innocence, and his heartbreaking decline in prison mirrored exactly what Jerry remembered of his father. The effect on Jerry was overwhelming. In interviews, he confessed that Postlethwaite's performance stirred emotions he thought he had buried. This emotional reaction speaks to the rare power of cinema. Movies often dramatize real lives, but it is unusual for them to reach a point where the real people involved feel they are truly reliving moments of love and loss. Number 15. To resemble a prisoner, Day-Lewis lived in dirt throughout filming. While preparing for his role as Jerry Conlon in the Name of the Father, Day-Lewis once again pushed his body and mind far beyond ordinary acting techniques. One of the more grueling methods he employed was refusing to bathe during the entire shoot. For weeks he lived in dirt and discomfort, just to embody the unwashed condition of a prisoner locked away in a harsh environment. Day-Lewis understood that physical sensations profoundly affect psychological states. By refusing basic hygiene, he carried around the stench, stickiness, and roughness of prison life on his skin, which in turn influenced his posture, mood, and emotional energy. This decision unsettled those around him. Cast and crew members recalled how Day-Lewis's presence sometimes became difficult because of the smell and his unkempt appearance. Yet in true method fashion, he remained completely unapologetic. This level of commitment earned both admiration and skepticism. Admirers praised his uncompromising dedication, while skeptics questioned whether such extremes were necessary. However, Day-Lewis was not pretending. He was genuinely interested in realism. Number 14. Director Jim Sheridan intentionally shot prison sequences in Near Darkness. Jim Sheridan has always been a director who understands the emotional weight of visual storytelling. In the movie, one of his most powerful choices was to present the prison sequences in near darkness. Rather than lighting the cells in a conventional cinematic way, Sheridan insisted on shadows, dim corridors, and claustrophobic frames that mimicked the oppressive reality of confinement. This creative decision was aimed at bringing viewers as close as possible to Jerry Conlon's experience. By enveloping the screen in darkness, he denied audiences the comfort of clarity. Viewers were forced to squint into the shadows, just as prisoners had to navigate their dimly lit cells, always surrounded by uncertainty and fear. The near darkness also served a psychological function. In film, light often represents freedom, knowledge, and truth. By withholding it, Sheridan amplified the character's alienation. Cinematographer Peter Biziou worked closely with Sheridan to achieve this effect. They deliberately underexposed certain shots, allowing details to vanish into blackness. Critics later praised Sheridan's prison sequences for their stark realism. Unlike many prison films that exaggerate brutality through violence, Sheridan conveyed horror through the atmosphere of darkness, silence, and the monotony of confinement. It was less about what was shown and more about what was felt. In the end, Sheridan's decision to shoot prison scenes in near darkness became a statement that filmmakers will continue to learn from. Number 13. Day-Lewis lost significant weight to embody a man worn down by incarceration. Daniel Day-Lewis's commitment to method acting is legendary, and during the production of In the Name of the Father, he once again proved just how far he was willing to go to embody a role. Beyond locking himself in a real prison cell and refusing to bathe, Day-Lewis also altered his entire diet to replicate the harsh conditions of life behind bars. He lost significant weight because he deliberately restricted himself to prison-style minimal meals. Prison food in the 1970s and 80s was in small portions, repetitive meals, and little nutritional variety. Day-Lewis mimicked this by eating only the bare minimum each day, sticking to tasteless staples like bread, porridge, watery soup, and boiled vegetables. Protein was scarce, fats were almost absent, and his caloric intake dropped far below what was normal for a man of his build. Over the weeks of filming, the impact became visible. His face grew more gaunt, his shoulders hunched, and his movements carried the drained, weary energy of someone deprived of nourishment. He had lost over 50 pounds at this time. The emotional impact of this choice was profound. Hunger and weakness altered his performance in subtle but powerful ways. His outbursts of anger stemmed from a place of genuine exhaustion. His quiet moments carried a drained sadness, and his restless pacing reflected the jittery energy of a body that was never fully satisfied. The result was a performance that radiated nothing but the truth. Number 12. Day-Lewis kept letters of real prison abuse and hatred to fuel his rage in the most intense scenes. Daniel Day-Lewis's preparation for In the Name of the Father was notoriously grueling. During filming, Day-Lewis reportedly kept collections of hateful, venomous letters, the kind of written hostility that prisoners like Jerry Conlon would have received. He used them as fuel to ignite his fury in the film's most emotionally explosive scenes. These letters weren't just props for Day-Lewis. He considered them as weapons. He wanted to feel the sting of being unjustly hated, and to immerse himself in the raw psychological assault that Jerry had endured while imprisoned. Every time he opened one of those letters, he confronted the bitter reality of being seen as guilty by the outside world, even when innocent. On set, Day-Lewis would sometimes read and reread the letters right before shooting specific scenes. Crew members noted that his demeanor would change almost instantly after spending time with them. His face would darken, his jaw would tighten, and he would radiate an anger that was both frightening and mesmerizing. The eruption that followed when cameras rolled wasn't a rehearsed performance, but reality. Back in the 70s, letters were often the only contact inmates had with the outside world. By keeping and using similar letters, Day-Lewis recreated the claustrophobic feeling of being trapped by the weight of public condemnation. By using these letters, he was allowing himself to be wounded in the same way Conlon had been. Number 11. The film reignited public debates on wrongful convictions and the British justice system. When In the Name of the Father premiered in 1993, Jerry Conlon and the other members of the Guildford Four had already been released from prison. Their convictions had been overturned in 1980 after years of campaigning and mounting evidence of police misconduct. For many, the story of the Guildford Four was old news, buried under years of political controversies. But Jim Sheridan's film changed that. By dramatizing their ordeal with raw emotional power, the movie reignited public debate, forcing people to confront the flaws in the British legal system in cases involving Irish suspects during the conflict. Audiences who barely remembered newspaper headlines from the 1970s suddenly found themselves immersed in the pain, injustice, and the inhuman treatment the Guildford Four might have faced. For younger viewers, it was their first introduction to one of Britain's darkest injustices. Politicians and legal experts could not ignore the renewed public scrutiny. While the Guildford Four were already free, the film's release coincided with continuing debates about the Maguire Seven, a group of family members and friends accused of being bomb makers. At that time, their convictions were still under review. The attention In the Name of the Father generated momentum, placing added pressure on the courts and the government to revisit these cases. In this way, the movie directly influenced real-world justice, showing how cinema could become a weapon for social change. Number 10. The British government accused Sheridan of distorting history. The attention In the Name of the Father drew not only sparked debate or social change, but also stirred controversy among the political establishment. The British government, along with several figures in the legal and law enforcement community, accused director Jim Sheridan of distorting history. They claimed that the film was dangerously one-sided, portraying the Guildford Four almost exclusively as victims, while downplaying the complexities of the legal case and the political tensions of the time. They accused Sheridan of making a film that was too sympathetic, too emotional, and too critical of the British justice system. At the heart of this criticism was the film's portrayal of police misconduct. Sheridan showed officers bullying Jerry Conlon, fabricating confessions, and manipulating evidence, which reflected what had been alleged in real life. However, government officials believed that these depictions portrayed law enforcement as villains. The fact that Sheridan himself admitted he was more concerned with emotional truth than strict factual accuracy gave his critics more ammunition. Sheridan, however, defended his choices. He argued that his duty as a filmmaker was not to provide a forensic account of legal proceedings, but to convey the human impact of injustice. This debate reflected a larger cultural clash between art and politics. Should strict historical accuracy bind filmmakers? Or do they have the right to reshape facts to evoke empathy and emotional understanding? This answer strongly depends on personal opinion. However, the government's criticism amplified the film's power, because accusations of distortion only fuel public curiosity. Number 9. The film transformed Jerry Conlon into a lifelong activist for the wrongly convicted. When In the Name of the Father was released, it became a turning point in the life of Jerry Conlon himself. Conlon, who had already been freed by the time the movie was made, had been struggling to rebuild his life after his wrongful imprisonment, and the years he spent behind bars had left him deeply scarred, both mentally and physically. By dramatizing his story and bringing it to international audiences, In the Name of the Father turned Jerry Conlon from a victim into a visible symbol of resilience. Suddenly, his name wasn't just attached to the scandal of the Guildford Four, but instead associated with a powerful cinematic narrative that exposed the flaws in the justice system. This attention gave him a voice, and he seized the opportunity to advocate for others who had been wrongfully convicted. Conlon began appearing at universities, conferences, and human rights events, speaking about his own ordeal and also about the systemic injustices that continued to plague the legal systems in Britain and beyond. The emotional weight of the film made his testimony even more impactful. More importantly, the film also validated Conlon's experiences in a way that legal documents and court judgments could not. This means that even though the British justice system had reluctantly overturned the Guildford Four's convictions, the stigma of having been branded a terrorist still clung to him. But the global success of In the Name of the Father reframed him in the public eye. He became a survivor, instead of being tagged as an ex-convict. Conlon used this visibility to campaign alongside other wrongfully convicted individuals, including members of the Birmingham Six, who had faced similar injustice. He became a global voice, highlighting wrongful convictions not only in Britain, but in the United States and beyond. Number 8. Courtroom scenes were shot in authentic courthouses. One of the most striking aspects of In the Name of the Father is its haunting courtroom scenes, where the fate of Jerry Conlon and the other members of the Guildford Four is decided. Rather than constructing elaborate studio sets, director Jim Sheridan opted to shoot these sequences in real British courthouses, many of which had been the sites of infamous trials in history. These courthouses had been the stage for trials that shaped public perception of justice and punishment in Britain, some involving high-profile political cases and others tied directly to the conflict in Northern Ireland. By filming in such locations, Sheridan ensured that the audience was not just watching a dramatization, but stepping into places where real-life offenders had been judged, condemned, or saved. Sheridan also exploited the atmosphere in his filmmaking choices. Instead of bright lighting in the courtroom, scenes were often shot with dim, natural light filtering through high windows. This approach emphasized the intimidating nature of the court, making it feel less like a place of impartial justice and more like a chamber of fate. Moreover, this choice reflected Sheridan's broader philosophy in making the film. He was less interested in neat, polished recreations and more in emotional truth. Ultimately, shooting in authentic courthouses gave In the Name of the Father a gravity that no set design could achieve. Number 7. Several extras in protest scenes were real activists from the 1970s. When Jim Sheridan staged the protest sequences in the Name of the Father, he wanted them to look and feel authentic. Thus, he invited real activists, instead of relying solely on hired background actors. Most of those activists were men and women who had marched, shouted, and campaigned during the 1970s and 80s for the release of the Guildford Four. Their presence gave the protests a raw and authentic energy that could not have been manufactured by actors alone. These were people who had stood in the rain holding placards decades earlier, chanting for justice when the public and press mainly had turned their backs. For these activists, returning to the streets was an emotional experience. Many of them had spent years battling against indifference and hostility. They had faced ridicule, suspicion, and even threats for daring to defend the Guildford Four when the British government insisted the men were guilty. Sheridan deliberately encouraged this authenticity. The actors also reported that filming alongside these activists was profoundly moving. Audiences, too, could feel that there was something different. By including real activists, In the Name of the Father captured the emotional intensity of the protests in a way no Hollywood-style crowd could. Number 6. Emma Thompson's role was expanded mid-production. Emma Thompson's presence in the Name of the Father added a unique balance to a film otherwise dominated by male characters. Initially, her role as Gareth Pierce, the real-life human rights lawyer who fought to prove the innocence of the Guildford Four, was meant to be relatively small. She was intended to appear in a handful of courtroom scenes and provide a legal voice of reason near the end. But as filming progressed, director Jim Sheridan recognized the force Thompson brought to the character and made the bold decision to expand her role mid-production. The artistic delivery of Thompson on set was far beyond what Sheridan had initially imagined. Every time she stepped into a scene, she shifted the emotional weight of the story. Her performance went beyond just presenting facts to carrying the righteous anger of someone who believed in justice above all else. Sheridan quickly realized that audiences would connect to her as a beacon of hope and humanity in a film otherwise steeped in darkness and despair. This led to an expansion of her role as they rewrote parts of the script, increased her screen time, and allowed her to interact more deeply with Jerry Conlon. This decision paid off in ways Sheridan may not have anticipated. Thompson's performance became one of the film's standout elements, earning her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Thompson herself felt that the role was transformative. She was already celebrated for her dramatic range, but in the Name of the Father, she showed a fierceness that audiences had not always associated with her. Number 5. Crew members often avoided Day-Lewis off-camera because he never broke character. For the entirety of the production, Day-Lewis refused to step out of Jerry Conlon's character. He embodied the wrongfully accused Irishman not only when the cameras rolled, but also off-camera. Crew members recalled how this choice created both awe and discomfort behind the scenes. As a result, many crew members found themselves avoiding him off-camera, unsure how to interact with someone who had seemingly erased the line between actor and character. When he walked onto set, he spoke in Conlon's voice at all times, refusing to drop it even during breaks or casual conversations. If a crew member tried to engage him lightly, they were often met with the raw, volatile energy of someone embodying years of wrongful imprisonment. This was intimidating for many, so they kept their distance and let him remain in his world. Day-Lewis also treated the set as an extension of Conlon's cell, avoiding comforts that might snap him back into his own identity. He sat alone, often looking exhausted or on edge. When he interacted with others, it was usually with the same guarded defensiveness that Jerry himself might have shown toward guards, lawyers, or strangers from the 1970s. Other actors were inspired by this method of acting, and it began to reflect in them as well. Pete Postlethwaite considered it a reminder to stay fully present and committed to the reality of the scene. The actor's refusal to break character kept the atmosphere on set aligned with the emotional truth Sheridan wanted to capture. If the crew felt uneasy, it only mirrored the discomfort Jerry Conlon had felt during his years in confinement. In this sense, the environment became a reflection of the story itself. Number 4. The soundtrack included contributions from Bono and Gavin Friday. Music has always been a powerful tool in storytelling, and Jim Sheridan knew that In the Name of the Father needed more than just a generic soundtrack. To capture this, Sheridan turned to two of Ireland's most iconic musical voices, Bono, the frontman of U2, and Gavin Friday, the singer-songwriter and longtime friend of the band. Their contributions gave the film a distinct Irish soul and a political resonance that no outsider could have replicated. Their music carried the raw emotional urgency of Ireland in the 1970s and 80s, when protests, injustice, and cultural pride were deeply intertwined. Bono, known for his outspoken political activism, saw the film as a chance to amplify a story that had already haunted Irish society for decades. On the other hand, Gavin Friday's contributions worked in a complementary way. His music created the atmosphere of confinement and despair that weighed heavily on Jerry and his father, Giuseppe. Involving Bono and Friday wasn't just about getting big names on the soundtrack, but grounding the film in its Irish identity. The impact of the soundtrack extended beyond the film. It helped introduce international audiences to the deeper political context of the Guildford Four's story. Number 3. Day-Lewis once collapsed during filming. Although Daniel Day-Lewis's method of acting comes from genuine passion and immersion into the role, it wasn't without consequences. During the production of In the Name of the Father, his total immersion into Jerry Conlon's world pushed him beyond his physical and emotional limits. Accounts from the set reveal that at one point, he actually collapsed from exhaustion. For those who witnessed it, the incident was alarming but not surprising. For someone who had been living so fully in Conlon's torment, it was inevitable his own body would eventually break down. By this stage in filming, Day-Lewis had already subjected himself to punishing conditions. He was living on a restricted prison diet, losing weight rapidly. He had locked himself in solitary confinement for days at a time, endured verbal and physical abuse from real prison guards at his own request, and refused to bathe throughout production. On top of the physical deprivation, he carried Jerry's emotional anguish like a second skin. He wept, raged, and trembled with such raw intensity that many crew members found it impossible to separate the man from the character. The collapse reportedly happened after a particularly grueling stretch of filming in the prison sequences. His body finally buckled under the strain. He fell to the ground, forcing production to halt, while medics and crew rushed to his aid. The incident has since become part of the mythology surrounding Day-Lewis's career. Number 2. The raw realism of the performances was so haunting that even critics admitted the acting was unforgettable. Although some critics and commentators objected to what they saw as Sheridan's one-sided depiction of the case, accusing the film of bending historical truth to generate sympathy, they couldn't dismiss the undeniable fact that the performances were extraordinary. Daniel Day-Lewis's portrayal of Jerry Conlon was widely hailed as one of the most raw and haunting performances of the decade. His physical transformation, the intense emotional outbursts, and the painful authenticity of his suffering made audiences feel as though they were witnessing Conlon's ordeal firsthand. Pete Postlethwaite's performance as Giuseppe Conlon also left an indelible mark. His quiet dignity, gentleness, and heartbreak created a powerful counterpoint to Day-Lewis's volatility. Emma Thompson, in her more minor but pivotal role as Gareth Pierce, also drew praise. While some critics felt her character's screen time was too limited to fully explore the technicalities of real-life legal battle, Thompson's sharp intensity and controlled anger left a deep impression. She captured the quiet but relentless fight of a lawyer who refused to accept the status quo. The realism of the performances extended beyond the leads. Extras who were actual activists from the 1970s brought a genuine edge to protest scenes, and Sheridan's decision to shoot in authentic courthouses and prisons made the film more believable. Ultimately, the acting gave the film its staying power. While debates about historical accuracy continue, the visceral performances remain untouched by criticism. Number 1. The film received 7 Oscar nominations. When In the Name of the Father was released in 1993, it quickly became one of the most talked-about films of the year. By the time the Academy Award nominations were announced, the film had secured an impressive 7 nominations. The nominations included Best Picture, Best Director for Jim Sheridan, Best Actor for Daniel Day-Lewis, Best Supporting Actor for Pete Postlethwaite, Best Supporting Actress for Emma Thompson, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Editing. It was a remarkable achievement, especially for a film that dealt with such a politically sensitive subject. For a moment, it seemed like Sheridan's movie might sweep the ceremony, but the unexpected happened when Oscar night arrived. In the Name of the Father went home empty-handed. Despite the wave of critical acclaim and public support, it lost in every single category. The Best Picture award that year went to Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List. Day-Lewis, though widely admired for his performance, lost Best Actor to Tom Hanks, who had stunned audiences with his role in Philadelphia. Similarly, Emma Thompson's decisive turn as Gareth Pierce was overlooked, and Postlethwaite's deeply moving performance as Giuseppe Conlon failed to secure him the award. Even Sheridan's screenplay, which had been a strong contender, lost to Steven Zalian's script for Schindler's List. The snub stung for many involved. Sheridan later admitted that while he was proud of the recognition, it was disheartening to see the film overlooked in every category. Still, the nominations alone were a good feat for the film's legacy. In hindsight, many film historians argue that In the Name of the Father deserved at least 1 Oscar, particularly for Day-Lewis or Postlethwaite. What have you learned from these weird facts about In the name of the Father, share with us in the comments and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button and watch other videos on this channel before you leave.